Hello everybody, and welcome to the next episode of Wheezy's Tips and Tricks for Battlefield 3. And as you can see, we'll be covering dogfighting in this video, and it'd be impossible to cover dogfighting and all its intricacies in a single video for YouTube, mainly because it would take hours upon hours to talk about all the things you need to know about dogfighting. But for the sake of Battlefield 3, we're going to focus on two main things, and that is keeping yourself alive, which obviously is the most important because you can't shoot anyone down if you're shot down. And the other thing we're going to talk about is some basic offensive strategies, nothing too advanced, but enough to keep you in the air and get some kills. So this first clip we're looking at is just kind of introduction of dogfighting in Battlefield. And this is on Xbox 360 for those of you that don't know. And some of the most important things that you can learn about dogfighting come from moments like this when you're behind the enemy, where this guy, for instance, is so obsessed with shooting down my teammate that he gives me a much easier shot than I should have had from his tail. So you can see now he's already disabled. A lot of evasive action he could have taken, he didn't. So these tips should hopefully get you to the point where only mistakes will get you shot down. Now, the first maneuver that we're going to look at is the Immelman, and this and the Split S are the two that we're going to focus on, and they are going to be foundations for what we're actually going to do. So the Immelman is very simple in that at level flight, you pull straight up until you're upside down heading in the opposite direction, and then you do a 180-degree roll to get wings level again. And you'll see that Immelman and Split S in and of themselves aren't extremely useful, but when we apply variations to them, we'll see how they can be applied usefully, especially in Battlefield. The Split S is, the Immelman is often referred to as a reverse Split S, where a Split S is from level flight, you roll over 180 degrees so that you're inverted, and then pull hard back on the stick, which will pull you underneath, and you're trading altitude for speed. So here's a three-dimensional diagram of a Split S, and we're going to use this to show you how the Split S is mainly used as a tactic for disengaging. So someone's on your tail, and a Split S will get you out of the situation. But, and that's still what we're going to focus on, but it can also be turned offensive. But here you'll see that if you employ some yaw during the Split S, then it makes your movement no longer just two-dimensional, it's three-dimensional. So instead of just moving along the vertical axis, you're also moving along the horizontal axis at the same time. And what this does is it makes it harder for your enemies to track you, especially in Battlefield where people can't turn their heads. An alternative to using yaw in the Split S is to use roll to modify how you're going to exit the Split S. So instead of heading back the opposite direction of where you started the Split S, by either rolling more than 180 degrees or less than 180 degrees and then pulling hard on the stick, you can again change the direction that you'll be traveling when you exit the Split S without using yaw. And mainly these tactics are employed in Battlefield 3 to confuse the enemy and lose track of them, because since you can't focus on the plane that you're dogfighting with, just getting out of their vision is often enough to get them off your tail and give you a chance to turn the defensive. So here you see this clip started out with me taking some gunfire. So I just start doing mad evasive action. And I start doing a basic bank here as a search maneuver, because you see I've already done an Immelman, and here's a kind of a modified Split S with a little bit of yaw to try and get around on his turn. And the point of a lot of these clips isn't necessarily as textbook examples of what to do, but just examples of how making yourself elusive can be enough to keep you alive, especially when you've got enemies locking onto you with missiles, which is a really good telltale sign of when evasive action is necessary. And that seems obvious, and we'll get to that a little bit more in a moment here. But basically, being unpredictable is the best way to get an enemy off your tail, and never staying in level flight or even near level flight when you're being attacked. Now here we'll see a situation where I'm getting straight into a disadvantaged engagement, and we'll show how using some defensive techniques can help you turn the table. So my plane's already halfway damaged, there's a chopper guarding our runway, and a fighter's immediately on my tail as I take off. So instantly I do, kind of a modified Immelman up over the top, and I'm just trying to make it so that this jet is not on my tail, but I've got the added problem of a helicopter. And helicopters, in my opinion, in Battlefield at least, are more dangerous to you in a jet than other jets are. Because with variations of these basic techniques of the Immelman and the Split S, you can easily confuse an enemy jet pilot. But a chopper has the advantage of hovering, so he can just pivot and watch you do all this crazy evasive action and continue to get missile lock on you. So here you'll kind of see the best action when engaging a jet and a chopper is to get away from the helicopter. So even if you have to sacrifice your tail to the jet, a tactic that I often use is to just hit the deck, hit the afterburners, and pick a direction away from the chopper, because the chopper cannot keep up. Let the jet have your tail, and rely on either your flares or extinguishers or whatever you're using as a countermeasure to keep you alive until you're far enough away from the jet that you can, again, begin an evasive action. So once you've got distance, you can do a split S, or since you're on the deck, most likely some sort of variation of an Immelman, where the way I'm kind of using the variations of these two is an Immelman will be when you're too low to do a split S. The split S is always preferable because it keeps your airspeed up. Not as big an issue in Battlefield as it would be in a combat simulation, because there's not a lot of conservation of momentum in dogfighting in Battlefield, so there's not a lot of advanced techniques you really have to know. And an Immelman in Battlefield is not much less effective than a split S, even though in real life you would drain a lot of airspeed for altitude, which is not necessarily good in a dogfight. Anyway, here you'll see that by just... a lot of these actions may seem random, and to an extent they are. I will pick a maneuver, or basically a direction that I want to go, and I will do a violent turn to get there. So whether it's a split S with some yaw in it, or a partial split S where I under-roll or over-roll and pull hard out of it, just to get them off my tail. Like that's part one, and then you worry about getting their tail back. So here, I pretty much almost bored the other aircraft off of my tail for my evasive action. They realized they weren't going to be able to lock me up, so he's going after my my teammate now. And by doing that, I'm able to pick up his tail, and now he's a little distracted because he still wants the kill on my teammate, and this is making him less evasive than he could be. Notice how he's not turning as hard as he could. He's evading when I get missile lock, which again, I'll come back to that. But getting them distracted onto a teammate, or even just to accept the fact that they are not going to catch you, will get them to break off and try and do something else, and that gives you an opportunity to get their tail back. Let's talk briefly about offensive techniques, and we're not going to talk about any real maneuvers, just the three basic principles of being on the attack. And here are the three basic angles of attack. You've got lag, pure, and lead angles, and not technically angles of attack. Anyway, lag pursuit will essentially put you, I won't even say behind the aircraft, because it's not in the way that you would hope to get it. Lag pursuit will put you at almost a perpendicular angle to the enemy aircraft, which can sometimes be good if you're coming in hot. Pure is essentially pointing your plane at their plane, which again will almost keep you in this infinite looping chase where you'll never really gain any ground. And what you really need is to do lead pursuit. In most cases, like I said, unless you're overshooting, which we'll mention in a second, but a lead pursuit will get you on the enemy tail by changing the angle that you are in relation to them. So when you're approaching an enemy aircraft perpendicularly, by taking a lead angle, when you line up with them, you will be on their tail. Unless this is the instance where their airspeed is lower than yours, and you're going so fast that when you take a lead angle, you'll overshoot, and that's bad because that puts you in a position for them to take a shot at you. So that would be a time where if you think that a lead angle is going to cause you to overshoot, then you want to take a severe lag angle, basically fly past the enemy plane, and then turn in back on and try and regain their tail, or get to a position where a lead angle will help you. And that's further complicated, as we'll see here, when you're going to guns, which I think you should always do in Battlefield, and I'll explain that here in just a moment. When you're using guns, you need a lag angle, or you need to have a lead angle to get a gunshot, right? Because you can't put your crosshairs on the enemy plane to shoot them down with guns. You have to put it out in front of them. But the problem with that is, if you're in a good position on the enemy tail and then you put a lead angle on them, like you'll see here, to try and get a gunshot. See there, I took a lag angle. I didn't really look at this, but I took a lag angle to try and line me up for a better shot on their tail. So here I have to lead with the crosshair, and that puts me a little out of position, although I frighten this guy into reversing direction, which gives me his tail again. But you have to push out to a little bit of a lead to get the shots on, and then if that gets you to the position where you're going to overshoot, then you'll have to break off into a bit of a lag pursuit so that you can turn back in. And it's kind of a dance that you'll kind of get a feel for. But missiles aren't very effective in Battlefield. It's just because enemy countermeasures are very effective, and there's actually some techniques that people can use without countermeasures to evade missiles, which is kind of like the varied split S that I showed you, where movement in 3 directions is often enough to confuse a missile to where it can't hit you. But really, what you want to focus on, first of all, is staying alive, right? So every other technique for going on the attack can be learned with enough time, enough experience. You'll get a feel for it if you know the basic concepts. But surviving gets you, keeps you alive long enough to learn those things. Because if you go up in the air and someone gets on your tail and you're not sure what to do, and you just start banking, for instance, like this guy's kind of doing here. He banks right, and then he pops a flare, and then he kind of banks left. He's already done, because banking is not effective enough to get me off his tail, especially when I'm keeping my airspeed low enough to stay behind him and not overshoot. So boom, there he goes. And that's the key, is keeping yourself alive long enough to learn the things you need to know. So using 3-dimensional movement is going to be the best way to keep yourself alive when someone's on your tail. So next time you get up in an aircraft and somebody gets a missile lock on you, an aircraft gets behind you and starts shooting at you, what I want you to do, get some altitude, roll over onto your back, pull underneath, and give it some yaw. And you'll be surprised how effective that is at just absolutely losing the enemy. And when they have air radar, like I'm flying here, they will have an easier time figuring out where you are to try and re-pursue you. But a 3-dimensional movement will even confuse the air radar, in that the radar doesn't show you specifically the direction the enemy is heading. Just, it's on a 2D plane. So doing a 3-dimensional movement will make the air radar misleading. So it may look like you're banking until you pull underneath, and then suddenly you're heading a different direction, and then it becomes a turning battle to see who can get back on their tail. And that's that's what you want to do, is get yourself in a position to where you can get on their tail and keep them off of yours. So like I said, next time you're flying and you're worried that somebody's on your tail, give them some 3-dimensional movement, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. And from there, you'll be able to apply these different techniques. Here again, you see, keep in mind when you're chasing somebody, look how easy this guy's making it. And what I want to talk about here briefly is, notice how when I was following him, I wasn't using my missile lock, and I wasn't taking shots at him until I had a good shot. And so I got one good burst and disabled him close to the ground. So avoid using missiles, because they can be jammed or decoyed, and if you get good with guns, those can never be stopped. A quick tip about the F-35s, because they kind of perplexed me when I first started flying around with them on the Carcand expansion, is don't think of them so much as jets, because when you fly against like these Sukhois, you're gonna have a hard time turning with them, because every time you try to hit on the brakes to turn tighter with them, you're gonna start to go into hover, which can be really frustrating when you're used to dogfighting and using that ability to slow your aircraft down to try and turn tighter than the enemy. But what you need to do is think of it as a helicopter. So you've got forward flight, but when you're approaching an enemy, use that slowdown and the fact that you're going into hover as a good thing. So then you become what I consider the most dangerous threat to an aircraft, and that's a helicopter. So you're a stationary target that can pivot and keep missile or gun lock on the enemy aircraft. So if you get in a turning fight with an enemy aircraft in the F-35, you bring it into a hover and you act like a helicopter until they essentially give you their tail and you can re-pursue them as a jet. I gave a couple of these clips where got people who weren't turning very hard and was able to get some jet-esque kills. But I'm also going to point out here in a second where I get where I go a little chopperish on the enemy. And that's like that's really where it kind of clicked in my mind that the F-35 was actually a usable aircraft. Because if you try to get into turning battle with one of these Sukhois, you're just going to get frustrated. You can't turn as hard as they can, and if you try to lower your airspeed to turn inside of them, you will go into hover. So their teammate took him out anyway. God, this game is beautiful, isn't it? Oh, so I may have put in too much F-35 footage here, but you know, it's always fun to watch. Here's an enemy helicopter, and I'm essentially going into helicopter mode to take him on. But since he's facing my direction, this is always a dangerous endeavor. I get the kill, but he gets my aircraft, and then I've got to bail. So, you know, like I said, that was a mistake on my part. I shouldn't have taken that helicopter on that way. And using these basic tips should give you enough of a knowledge of how flight works in Battlefield 3 to make it to where you'll be the only cause of getting shot down. Pretty much every time now I get shot down, I know that I did something wrong. I either got too greedy, staying on an enemy aircraft's tail, and another aircraft came in and got a shot on me, or I do something stupid and try to chase a guy too close to the ground when I know I can't turn hard enough to keep off the ground, or just picking a fight with a helicopter or an anti-aircraft vehicle. So try to avoid letting your pride get the best of you, and take advantage of what your aircraft can do. And here you'll see me kind of go into hover mode again, and the least dangerous an enemy jet ever is when it's on the ground. Personally, to keep your pride, I would not suggest just camping the enemy runways, because it'll make you feel horrible, or at least it should, unless you're a bad person. But if you're on patrol and you see an aircraft taking off, there's nothing wrong with taking it down. Just don't sit over there. That's just my 2 cents. And that's my not so quick F-35 tips. Here, for this last major clip, we're gonna talk about kind of the whole package here. So as soon as I take off, I'm immediately on the attack, and I do go to missiles here just because I had such a fast attack on this guy, and he didn't appear to be turning like he should. And so I keep on his tail with the guns to try and get him down. And I want to talk a little bit more about missiles. And essentially, they're useful in times, in rare occasions. For instance, if an enemy is on your teammate's tail, sometimes hitting him with missile lock can get him A, off your enemy's tail, and B, cause him to break into a turn that may put him in an advantageous position for you to take him out. So keep that in mind. Against helicopters, missiles are really your best weapon because it's so hard to get a good gun run on a chopper. But again, flares make them really ineffective. So when you're in an aircraft, the mindset I want you to be in is that guns are your weapon. They can't be blocked. They can't be decoyed. And if you're, if you know the fundamentals, you can always get kills with them. And here you'll see I kind of switched to missiles for a second, but I realize that the aircraft that I'm coming in on doesn't realize I'm there. Here, as I go to missile lock. There, I used it to try and startle him into a turn. And there you see he kind of broke off the course he was following and gave me an easier shot at his tail. So they can be a good tool, but they can also be dangerous to warn the enemy that you're chasing them. So I may not have mentioned earlier when I did mention it briefly earlier during that clip where if you're following an aircraft and he's just lollygagging, making gun runs on the ground, he doesn't know you're there, don't get a missile lock on him because it will immediately alert him that he's being followed. Just stay on his tail, go real slow, and he'll give you that golden position to get one good gun burst that's going to just knock him out of the air, and he won't have any idea what happened. But regardless of how well you fly, occasionally things will happen. You'll get greedy or whatever, and that's when you'll end up getting in trouble. So here me and a wingman are taking this guy out. I'm putting missiles on him just so to try and steal a kill from my wingman. But there, see, I got greedy. I was chasing his tail. I wasn't aware of another aircraft around. He got a good angle on me, put some rounds into my aircraft, and it's disabled. And this, I don't have extinguishers on, so my aircraft below 50% means it's burning out. And my priority now isn't, getting that other aircraft or trying to get some sort of revenge. I'm pushing myself over the objective, and I'm getting myself back in the game. So I put myself over the only enemy objective that's not captured. I bail out as he's continuing to chase my plane that's already been shot down. And I'm going to parachute in and continue being the objective. And this falls in with what I always say about aircraft and vehicles in general in Battlefield. And that is, no matter how good you are in them, it's almost a universal truth that you'll be more effective on the ground than you are in that vehicle. So if you're in an aircraft and you're disabled, you know you're going down, the best thing you can do for your team is to get your disabled aircraft over an objective and get yourself out so you can get back into the fight. Because don't think of yourself as a pilot in Battlefield or as a vehicle driver. And don't let yourself go down with your plane so that you can wait for it to respawn and spawn back in it. Just get back in the fight. Here I pick another fight with a chopper, slam myself into him, which was stupid. I was just trying to keep my gun reticle on him. I wasn't actually trying to ram him, but alas, I have. And so now again, I'm pushing myself as it's burning out as close to the objective as I can, and then bailing so that I can get back into the fight. So this is essentially a technique for getting shot down, and again you'll see how when I get shot down and when you use these techniques, that I believe it'll be the same for you, you'll know you did something wrong and you screwed up. So rather than dwelling on it, get yourself back in the game. Get back in the fight. Here I am chasing another helicopter. These helicopters, man, I tell you, they can ruin your day. See there, chasing the chopper, someone gets a shot on me, and not quite sure what's going on. There he is on my air radar. Keep him behind me. I think I may recover from this one before I finally bite it. Yeah, this guy gave me his tail back. Oh yeah, and his buddy is shooting me. Oh, and I had this guy too. See, and that's where you get greedy. It's like, I've got his tail. I know I can shoot him down, but no, his buddy got me. If I bugged out, if I hit the deck, hit the afterburners, I probably could have gotten out of there with my plane, but I didn't. My mistake. I bail out, and I'm going at the objective. So I hope I didn't ramble too much during this. It's and not the most coherent set of things. If I could break this out into chapters, if I had time to, I know I could, but if I had time to break this out into chapters and do a full dogfighting course, I could be a little more precise about it. But I hit all the major points I wanted to, and that's, still be a team player, be evasive. Don't let them get your tail. I've given you some techniques so that you can get their tail back. Get some good angles on them so you can get your shots, and if things go shit, then bail out and help your team on the ground. I hope you guys enjoyed.